Do you need savings in addition to a government pension like OMERS? I get asked this question quite often by people that are government employees. We have a lot in the Ontario that are OMERS, the Ontario provincial government, but it's similar with the federal government and those. So the question is, do you need savings in addition to a government pension like OMERS? So that means you're already putting, let's say 10% of your paycheck is being withheld at source, and your employer's matching it. So isn't that enough? So that's the question. So what we're going to talk about today is what is the formula to know how much your government pension will be. What is the rule of thumb for your pension with 30 years service? So we have a rule of thumb. How much do you need to retire with the lifestyle you want? I'll give you 10 examples of a retirement plan with a full pension, and that'll give you a good idea of the answer to this. So do you need to invest more conservatively after you retire? And how does a financial plan become the GPS for your life? How does this fit in? Okay. So first thing is the formula for the pension for OMERS is it's 2% per year times the average of your best 5 years. You probably heard something like that. Some corporate ones or some other ones might be 1.8%, or some of them are a smaller amount, but sort of the best ones are 2% per year times the average of your best 5 years. Okay. That means if you work the full 30 years, 30 years times 2% is 60% of your best 5 years. Now, your best 5 years in most cases is the last 5 years. So think of it as the 60% of the third year before the third last year before you work. That's kind of what it is. Now, it's integrated with CPP, so the formula amount is what you get from your government pension and CPP as well. You have old age security on top of that, but it's those two are included. And then typically the amount that you get is about 5 to 10% less than that formula if you're married. And that's because there's an additional benefit that if your spouse outlives you, they get usually 60%, but they get a part of the pension continued. And that reduces your pension by 5 to 10%, depending on if your spouse is male or female and older than you or younger you and that kind of thing. So the general rule of thumb that we have, so if you're on a government pension, the way to think of it is your pension plus CPP is going to be about half of your salary at the end. That's a rule number. So remember, it's 60%. If you work the full 30 years, it's 60% of the third last year, and then reduced by 5 or 10%. So let's say roughly half of your final salary. Think of that as a general rule of thumb. Now, is that enough? What we do when we look at a retirement plan is we help you actually think through what your retirement's going to be. So we look at, okay, first of all, what's your cash flow now? Just so you get a good picture of it. Like where does all the expenses go? And then you should design your specific retirement, what you want. And the answer to this question depends a lot on what retirement that you want. So, for example, a good starting point is if you start with what you're spending today on everything, that's a good starting point. But stop and think about all the things that be different. So probably your mortgage will be gone. Now, will you be in the same home? I find most people prefer to stay in the same home. Some want to downsize so they can, to a condo so they can travel more. So maybe that's your house costs are different and all that. One thing is you won't have to save for RSP for retirement again after you retire, if you're doing that now. And hopefully you have your other debts and that paid off. You're still going to buy cars, and I don't know, when you retire, you might want to buy nicer cars or something. The kids are probably going to be gone. Your groceries may well be the same, even if the kids are gone, because I find a lot of retired people tends to barbecue more and entertain more, that kind of thing, but they may not be. Then you probably have some, like while you're working, all your medical costs are covered. After you retire, not all of them are. So you usually have some medical costs, unless your employer covers all of it. And then the big thing is entertainment and vacations and just spending money. Most retired people want to have more, especially vacations. They want to travel more. It's very common for people to want to spend 5, 10, 15,000 per year more on travel than when they're working, because now they have all this time and they love traveling. And we've done some where it's 50, 60,000 a year or 100,000. It's surprising how much you can do. And then generally entertainment, you get more time. So, want to go for dinner more often, once a week, twice a week, or something like that. And then just your general spending, there's one woman that said to me, everything I like to do costs money. So if I have more time, obviously need more money. But anyway, so now you may not be that way, because we also have clients that have, very basic retirement. They're just, homebodies, like to stay home. They have, their hobbies are not expensive. They don't go out for dinner, and so they don't like traveling. And so, okay, so then you don't need as much. So, but if you figure out specifically what you need, that's the first step to it. Because when you say, is it enough? You need to know whether it is enough. And I'll tell you how I think of that. So I had a friend that called me up from the car. He says, I'm in the car, I'm driving. Will I get to my destination on time? And of course, the first question is, I don't know, where are you going, and where are you now, and how fast are you going? So it's the same thing with a retirement plan. It's like, what is the retirement plan? How comfortable do you want to retire? How far are you from it now? And what else do you have? And then how fast are you going to get there? How are you going to invest? So those are all factors. So now, typically, here's a few typical factors, because if you have your pension now, after you retire, you're not going to have a mortgage. So if you're renting, you're still going to have it, but you're not going to have a mortgage. And you don't have so right now you have CPP and EI deductions coming off your paycheck, which you wouldn't have then. And you won't have a pension deduction. Like right now, probably 10% of your pay goes to your pension. So, like it could be that, out of your salary, that could be 40% of your salary. Let's say 20 or 30% is the mortgage, plus the 5% is CPP and EI, and 10% to pension. So that could be 40% of your income. But then most people want to spend, let's say 5% more, 5% of their income more on entertainment, and 10, 15% more on travel, and maybe they don't spending money. And so you end up with 75, 80, sometimes more. That's what I very commonly see. Now, I've seen 200%. In fact, I've seen it higher than that. I've seen 40% of that. The retirement goal is 40% of your salary before, or it could be 200%. So it could be very widely different. And the big important thing here is, don't go with, like, a lot of people say, well, what do most people do? And I said, well, that's not really what you're trying to do. We're trying to create your retirement. Like, what's the lifestyle you want to have? So you kind of need to answer that before you can really answer that question. Now, okay, so let's say you figured that out. You know what your goal is. Yeah, you know what your pension is. So let's take some common examples just to give you a concept of what it would look like. So I've got here a series of possible retirement plan results, and to show you what typically happens. And there's a big difference between those that invest in a balanced portfolio, so like half stocks, half bonds, or 60-40, which typically, might long-term make 5%, and then an equity portfolio, 100% equities, that might make 8% a year long-term, let's say. But okay, so here's the first example: is the person you're 35 years old, single, earn $50,000 a year, and you're going to retire in 30 years at age 65. So you're investing from 35 to 65. You're making 50,000 now. You're going to retire in 40,000 a year before tax. We're going to assume 3% inflation. All of these we assume 3% inflation, and we assume maximum government pensions, OAS and CPP. So this is a person, no pension. Okay, and the number that they need, if they invest in a balanced portfolio, they need about 1.15 million, and they'd have to invest 17,000 a year. That's 34% of their income. Is really ridiculous. And with an equity portfolio, they need 775,000. They have to invest 6,500 a year. That's 13% income. Not easy, but doable. And see, there's a huge difference here for most people investing. If you're in a balanced portfolio, you probably are never going to get to your goal. But an equity portfolio, it's in the doable range. Okay, that's no pension. Now, the same person, let's say they have a government pension like OMERS, they work the full 30 years. Then what happens? So now they need, with 5% return, balanced portfolio, they need 300,000. They have to invest 5,000 a year. That's only 5% of their income. An equity portfolio, 8% a year. They need 200,000. Only have to invest 2,000 a year. That's 2% of their income. So pretty low. All right. So that's a single person with and without government pension. So now the next one is a married couple. So this is, neither one is in a government pension. They need to invest 3 million. So now they both make 50,000, and they will both want to retire in 40,000. So they make 100,000 together, retire in 80,000. With a balanced portfolio, they need 3 million. They have to invest 34,000 a year. Again, 34% of their income. Ridiculous. With an equity portfolio, it's 1.55 million. They have to invest 13,000 a year, 13% of income. Okay, so that's, again, doable, but not easy. Now, let's say one of them has a government pension and one does not. Okay, now the one amount that they need with the balanced portfolio, they need 1,450,000. They have to invest 21,500 a year. That's 21% of their income. With an equity portfolio, it's 980. Let's say $1 million is the goal, and you have to invest 8,500. So it's about 9% of income. Okay. So now, this is if they're both on an OMERS pension. So they both make 50,000, making 100, retiring on 80. On a balanced portfolio, they need 600,000. They have to invest 9,000 a year. That's 9% of income. And equity portfolio, it's 400,000 is what they need. They need to invest 3,500 a year, 4% of income. Okay, so it's actually not very much that you need to invest if both are in there. And so if you don't invest anything at all, you'll be a little short, but not drastically short. All right, so now let's take a look at the same. Those are people making 50,000 a year. Let's take people earning 100,000 a year and what happens there. So again, let's start with a single person, age 35, making 100,000 a year, retired age 65 on 75,000. So the first one is 80%, this one is 75%. So saving for 30 years, 3% inflation, maximum CPP and OAS. So now with a balanced portfolio, 5% a year, you need 3,375,000. You have to invest 50,000 a year. That's half of your income. Just totally ridiculous. So that's why you really can't make it with a balanced portfolio. With an equity portfolio, you need 2,275,000. You have to invest 19,000 a year. So it's about 20% of your income. So not easy, but that's doable. That's, maxing your RSP a little bit more. So now let's say that same person has a maximum government pension. So now with a balanced portfolio, they only need 900,000, invest 13.5, that's 14% of income. And with an equity portfolio, they only need 600,000, invest 5,500 a year, that's 5% of income. Okay, all right, so that's, fairly easy to do that on top of your government pension. And 5% a year is, again, if you don't do it, you're not going to be way short, just somewhat short. So your retirement income will be a little less than the target here. So now let's take a married couple. Okay, they're 35. They each make 100,000, and they want to each retire on 75. So it's 200,000 family income, retire on 150. With a balanced portfolio, they need 6.8 million. They have to invest 100,000 a year. That's 50% of their income. This is no pensions. With an equity portfolio, they need 4.6 million. These invest 40,000 a year. That's 20% of income. So 20%, again, maxing RSP and a little bit more. Now, one of them has OMERS. Then they need, with a balanced portfolio, they need 4.3 million, invest 63,000 a year. That's 32% of income. Really high, still really, really tough. With an equity portfolio, they need 2.9 million, but they need to invest 25,000 a year. That's 13% of income, not even maxing their RSP. So that's in the doable range. And then let's say they both have OMERS. Now with a balanced portfolio, they only need 1.8 million. Invest 27,000 a year, so it's 14% of their income. So it's still quite a bit, but possible. With an equity portfolio, they need 1.2 million, invest 10,500 a year. That's only 5% of your gross income, so not too much. So that's kind of where it is. So now I put these down on a sheet just so you can see them. So the first 5 here, this is all people making 50,000 a year, retiring on 40,000. So either single or married. And you see the percentages that they need. And so if you're an equity portfolio, you need 13% if you're not in the pension. And if everybody is in the OMERS or in the government pension, you only put 4%. So there, what you kind of see is you're paying 10% of your income into OMERS. So without a pension, you're paying 13%. You have to save 13%. With OMERS, you put 10% into OMERS and 4% into RSP, so it's almost the same amount. And you see something similar. This is for people making 100,000 a year, retiring on 75,000. With an equity portfolio, again, it's 19%, 19 or 20% without a pension. But if everybody is on a pension, then it's 5 or 6%. So it's that you're already paying the 10% to your government pension at source, and then a little bit different. All right. Now, so that's it. That's the pension. So it seems like, in most cases, you need to invest a little bit more. And there's a few other advantages, though, of having your own investment. So even if you're going to be fine, with enough money, even if you're satisfied with that basic income, there are some differences. So tax planning, your government pension is, so if you retire and all you have is your OMERS, your government pension plus CPP and OAS, everything is taxable. And we've got clients like that, and it's hard to do much tax planning with their retirement because everything they have is taxable. Not much you can do. But if they have some other investments, so you got a pension plus you got RSP and TFSA, and maybe some non-registered investments, maybe they're doing something like the Smith maneuver, then what happens is the taxable income and the cash income can be very different. So you can do quite a bit of tax planning. We often very much target for retired people. We have a target taxable income to stay, we want to pay only 20% tax or only 30% and not get into the higher brackets. And you can do that by deciding what to get from where. You can't do that if it's all pensions. The other big thing is lump sums. So, if you're given a government pension, everything comes to you paid monthly, or you don't have somewhere to take a lump sum from. But if you have other investments, then you've got this freedom. You could take a lump sum out, especially if you're TFSA or your non-registered investments, and pay little or no tax. And that's great for, if you're going to do one big trip, we had a client doing a round the world cruise, or you're going to buy a new car, maybe an expensive one. I've some clients want to do that, or you're doing a big home rental, or you're going to buy a new home or something like that. So all these things you could do, if you have investments that you can't do if everything's in a pension. Now, just to give you a comparison of formula so you'd see what would be intuitive. So, the OMERS formula, it's a big actuarial formula, but the underlying basis of it is you put in 10% of your income, your employer matches it. Now, they guarantee it. So, in actual fact, they usually put in quite a bit less than a 10%. And the reason is the formula assumes investments make 5% a year. They actually generally make more than that over time within the pension. And the government, your government keeps the difference. So they put in the difference if returns are lower, and they keep the difference if it's higher. And usually it's higher. So they're usually putting in 10%. But I mean, the formula is you put in 10 and they put in 10, it's 20%, and you're making 5% of a year like a balanced fund. That's the OMERS formula assumptions. If you got your own investments, then you get RSP room of 18% of income and TFSA room of 7,000 a year. So those together are similar or a little bit higher than what goes into the OMERS plan. And then the rate of return, of course, depends on what your investments are. If you're a balanced person, it would be 5%. If you're an equity person, you're making 8%. So then you can actually get a fair amount higher return than what's built into the OMERS. The general advice is if you don't have the pension, then, contribute 20% of your income in equities, 8% a year long term. And that usually gets you to your goal or very close to it, something along that range. So that's 20% of your income if you don't have OMERS, and it's 10%, 20% that's going into OMERS. Now, so bottom line is, do you need savings in addition to the government pension like OMERS? The short answer is yes. In every case, you need. The exception is if everyone in your household has a government pension and all work the full 30 years or are very close to it, and you're comfortable with a very minimal passive retirement income, and you don't need extra lump sums, then maybe you're fine without savings. But we've written, well over 1,000 financial plans, and hardly anybody is like that. We do have the odd one, but very few. So almost everybody with a government pension should still be saving. Now, we talked there a bit about the 5% versus 8%. The rate of return. And, the question is, do you need to invest more conservatively when you retire or even when you're saving up to it? So based on risk tolerance, a lot of people invest more conservatively because they feel it's safer. And especially when they get to retirement, they feel they need to. But if you look at long-term rates of return, you find that stocks are actually more reliable than bonds as a long-term investment. I'm talking 20, 30 years or longer. We track the long-term return, the 200-year return of stocks is basically 7% above inflation. If inflation averages 3, that's 10, or if it averages 2, that's 9. So that's kind of the long-term rate of return. And if you look at it, it's very consistent. It's very close to the long-term trend for all of the last 200 years, despite all the wacky stuff that's happened. Bonds, sometimes, long-term return has been about 3.5% above inflation, but they have, sometimes they've had 40-year periods where interest rates were going up and it was high inflation, and bonds just get killed in that kind of environment. They don't adapt. With stocks, you're investing in companies that adapt to whatever's going on. If it's high inflation, they raise their prices higher and they keep up with it. So you tend to make a bit higher return over time with it. So that's why stocks tend to adjust to everything that happens in the market. Bonds don't. So when you look at standard deviation, a measure of consistency of return, measure of risk, or how how well you can predict your investments, what you see is stocks are more risky than bonds for 1, 2, and 5 years, and a little bit more for 10. But when you get to 20 and 30 years, stocks are actually more predictable than bonds after inflation. So, when you saw all those plans and you saw how much easier it is to get to your goal with 8% return versus than 5, 8% is a doable thing, and it is reliable if you do it long term, and you have the risk tolerance and you can stay invested with it. So, if you look at the stock market in 1 year period, it's ups 1 year period, it's ups and downs, and you never know what's going to happen. But when you're in for 25 years, it's very consistent. Like it's always been like in the modern stock market since around 1930, from then till now. 25-year period, the worst one has been 8% a year. And that's why we tend to use 8% a year for an equity portfolio. So bottom line is, but if you have an equity portfolio, you need to be able to stay with it. And there will be times when it falls 20, 30, 40%, and you have to stay with it. And, like people give you a risk tolerance form. What really is risk tolerance? And bottom line is, it is a learned skill. You can learn to have a higher risk tolerance, and it is the ability to do nothing when your investments go down. So if you're in an all equity portfolio, if you do this for 30 years, there will be some major declines in that period, though. I'm sure there'll be some 30%, maybe 40% declines, possibly more, but it's going to happen. And if you just do nothing, and you got a proper diversified portfolio based on history, it's always kind of recovered, and usually within a year or two. So you just do nothing and just wait, and it's all fine. But if you're not going to be able to do that, not be able to do nothing, then you switch to something else. Then you can lock in a loss, and then maybe you just have to invest for the more concern and the lower return. And then I guess that's your retirement plan. That will be quite a bit harder. So now this whole process of having a financial plan, it is the GPS for your life. And it's, people ask me this question about, government pension, do I need to save? And really a financial plan is what answers that question. That's what answers your, the retirement for anybody. And it's without that plan, it's like you're having no GPS for your life. You get into every intersection and should I turn left or right? What do I feel like it? But with a financial plan, exactly you define your end goal, exactly what you have to do to get there, exactly how to optimize everything, how to minimize tax, and what kind of investment return you need to make it there. So that's what a financial plan does for you. And it's the only way you can really, be confident you're going to get that financial independence. And, once you get that independence, life feels completely different. So we've had clients that made it to the point, they set their retirement goal, the nest egg that they need to retire on, they reach it. And when they're there, some of them just enjoy their work and want to continue working. But they said it feels totally different if I'm working because I choose to. But, I don't need the money. So then, if I stop enjoying, I'm just going to quit. So it just feels completely different. And so a financial plan, what you do is you're making the goal your goal. It's not what most people want. It is your goal. You define specifically the lifestyle that you and your spouse, you've decided together what lifestyle you want, how much travel do you want to do, and entertainment. And you can choose to have a very comfortable retirement and just, now be able to know what you have to do to get there. So when we do flex plans, our software can very quickly go between different scenarios. So we call it interactive financial planning. So we can very quickly, like within a few seconds, we can show you several different lives for yourself. Like, clients will ask me, so what if I want to have an extra $10,000 a year for travel through my entire 30 years of retirement? How much more do I have to save per year to do that? Or I want to retire 1 or 2 years earlier. What would I have to do to get there? And we can very quickly show different scenarios and, to see what you need to do. And that's, what helps you kind of achieve what you need. And so bottom line, you can have a very comfortable retirement. To do that, you should generally try to be 10 or 20% ahead of your goals. So you got a bit of margin of safety. And, if you've got full government pensions and you still do some investing based on your plan and make, equity 8% rate of return or something like that long term, you can have a very comfortable retirement. All right, so that's my talk. So what we talked about, what's the formula to know how much your government pension will be? What's the rule of thumb for your pension with 30 years service? How much do you need to retire with the lifestyle you want? I give you 10 examples of a retirement plan, see what it looks like. Do you need to invest more conservatively after you retire? And how does a financial plan become the GPS for your life? Thank you for listening. My name is Ed Rempel. My blog is Unconventional Wisdom. It's the #1 blog in Canada for a full-service financial planner, and it's just edrempel.com. Or if you want, are interested in potentially talking to us about maybe working together, there's no pressure. We just set up a 30-minute consultation where we just kind of talk. What are you looking for? What do we offer? We'll just kind of see if it makes sense to work together. And you can find it on my blog under contact, but just go to edrempel.com/talk. Also have a podcast and YouTube. Podcast is edrempel.com/listen. YouTube is edrempel.com /watch. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.